Hey Richmond, Virginia, are you concerned about a recession and what that means for the housing market? We'll cover that today on your July 2022 Housing Market Update. All right, so the big talk is the R word, recession, which seems to be on everybody's mind with the CPI going up and gas prices and whatnot. A lot of talk. A recent Wall Street Journal poll found that 3/4 of global CEOs said that they think we're either in a recession currently, which I would agree with, or that we will be in one in the next 12 to 18 months. So the real question is, what does that mean for the housing market? So what we do know is that a recession does not necessarily mean a housing crisis or home depreciation. And this is a tough one for a lot of people to understand because I feel like a lot of people still have whiplash from 2008, which was obviously the Great Recession. The thing to know about that one, though, that was a recession that we were kicked into by the housing market. So the housing market was the culprit in that recession. In a typical economic recession, housing usually doesn't get as affected as much. If we look at the graphic, you will see only in the last 2 of the last 6 recessions did home values go down. Of course, we have 2008, that was a big one. But the previous one before that, it was only about a 2% drop in home values that we saw during that recession. What we do know about a recession, though, is that mortgage rates tend to be lowered towards the back end of a recession or to get us out of a recession. So right now there's a lot of talk about interest rates jumping up, and yes, they have drastically changed from an almost artificial or arguably artificial rate of sub 3% to now 6% is kind of where we're sitting right now. What we find is that the Federal Reserve will typically raise interest rates to kind of get their arms around inflation, but generally to get us out of a recession, they will go ahead and lower rates. And if you look at the graphic, you'll see in the last 6 recessions, rates were lowered to fuel the economy. So it's kind of a tool that the Federal Reserve has in order to grease the wheels to get things going again. So that might leave you asking, hey, what is actually happening in our Richmond metro market? Well, I want to share some stats with you. First and foremost, the median home price has continued to climb through the month of June. We're currently at $380,000 for the median home price in Richmond Metro. We are seeing where new listings are on a rise, but the month supply of inventory is relatively unchanged at 0.8 months supply of inventory, meaning that even though we're getting more inventory that's coming to the market, that inventory is being gobbled up at just the same rate as it was before. Now, we have seen where month supply of inventory has creeped up a little bit from what it was earlier this year, so we're not as much of a frenzy of a market. We went from 0.6 month supply of inventory to 0.8 month supply of inventory. But context is everything. Keep in mind that 6 months supply of inventory is considered a balanced market. Anything below that is a seller's market. So we're still very much in a seller's market, even at 0.8 months supply of inventory. And I will say that Richmond has not necessarily seen the cool off that some other markets have seen. So I've got friends, other agents throughout the country and even in Canada. Markets that shot up a lot more, California, Idaho, parts of Canada, they are seeing a much more drastic cool off, but I would argue that they saw a much more drastic heat up during the height of the market. And you'll notice that in Metro Richmond right now, the percentage of list price to sales price that sellers are getting is at 104.5%, meaning that the average home seller in Richmond, Virginia is getting 4.5% over their asking price. Now, I will say, keep in mind on these sales, though, these are sales that are now closing out in June. So these are contracts that were entered into in the month of May. So I do predict, I will guess that we will see that number continue to come down a little bit in the coming months as we're seeing sales that are now going under contract will be closing in July and August. So the question then becomes, where do we go from here? We are going to see more moderation in price appreciation, but we're not going to see depreciation, meaning that we are still going to see homes continue to appreciate, but at much more moderate, average, and average levels. So we saw 19% appreciation in the year of 2020. That is definitely not average. 50-year average appreciation for homes is anywhere from 3 to 4%, depending on who you ask. So we're seeing where we're returning to a much more normal market. But I will share with you, though, the revised forecast of the 7 major forecasters, so all the big wigs in the housing industry are saying that we're going to see a national average of 8.5% appreciation in 2022. So for those of you that are concerned or wondering where the market is going to go, all of the big wigs are saying that we're going to continue to see price appreciation just at a more moderate rate. That being said, 8.5 is still about double the 50-year average of what we see in home price appreciation. So you might be asking yourself, how can that be? And I've had a number of these type of questions from clients of, Chris, how is that possible? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. This bubble has to burst at some point. I just don't see how this can be sustained. I don't see how this doesn't come down. And I can appreciate where people are coming from. Once again, if you lived through 2008 and you experienced that, I understand where people have a lot of fears about that, because this market looks and feels a lot like 2008, but the economics are just very, very different here. So two graphics I'm going to share with you. We are just now returning to the 50-year average of homes being completed, aka homes being built in this country. So for the last 14 years, we have been below the 14-year average of homes that are being built. The reason for that is when the 2008 crash, you had a lot of skilled tradespeople that were in the home building business that got out of the business, the builders that got out of the business, and you went and did other things. So essentially the home building industry has been understaffed for the last 14 years, which is why we have just not seen that production. So we have a true lack of inventory that cannot be solved in short order. This is going to take a few years for us to even return. Like I said, we're just now returning to the 50-year average, and we've got a lot of ground that we still need to make up. So that's one thing. We've got a very systemic lack of inventory. And then second, on the demand side, we now have Gen Z. We have the better part of the millennial generation, now part of Gen Z. Both generations of which I will share with you are bigger than the baby boomers that are now entering their peak home buying year. So there is a systemic demand that cannot be satisfied over the next couple of years that is going to continue to be there as these millennials and Gen Zers are entering their peak buying years. So you've just got a long-term lack of supply, a long-term demand, which is why experts are predicting we are going to continue to be in an appreciating and a seller's market for the next couple of years. So what does this all mean for you? For sellers, I've got 3 tips for you. Number one, it's still a great time. So it's still a great time to sell. Yes, you may have missed the peak pandemonium, but you really didn't miss it, because if you heard what I'm saying, we're not seeing where prices are going down. We're seeing where prices have more or less plateaued. So even though, yes, you may not be selling when it was crazy in 2020, you're selling now. It's a little more moderate in 2022, but you're experiencing the good fortune of being at the top of the mountaintop where homes have already appreciated. Yes, they're not appreciating at the same rate, but you're getting a much better price for your home from somebody that even sold in a hotter market at the beginning of 2020. So still a great time to sell. Number two, aspirational pricing will hurt you. So we were in a market there for, I would say, a year and a half to 2 years where pricing really didn't matter. You could just throw your home on the market for whatever, and even if it was overpriced, you were still going to sell. You were still going to sell quickly. You were still going to sell for a good price. We are seeing now where sellers that are pricing their properties way too high are not doing as well. Those homes are sitting. They're experiencing price drops, and a lot of times when they do experience those price drops, they end up selling for less than they potentially could have had they priced it right from the start. So pricing is once again important. It was always important, but it's that much more important now. And then lastly, for sellers, fear not. So I've had a number of conversations with individuals over the last couple of weeks where it seems like, once again, everybody thinks the bubble's going to burst. Everybody, there's been a little bit of fear selling, or folks that I've talked to that felt like they needed to sell their home when it didn't necessarily make sense for them personally, but they just felt like if they didn't take their chips off the table, they were going to, lose a lot of value. Certainly, I don't have a crystal ball. Nobody does. Based on what we're hearing from experts, based on what we're seeing in the marketplace, we don't actually see where values are coming down. So don't feel like you've got to sell if you're just fearful that if you don't sell now, you're going to miss out and you're going to lose value. And then for buyers, we've got 3 tips. So number one, marry the house, date the rate. So a lot of buyers now are complaining about rates. Yes, rates are higher than they were before, but there are signs that are showing us that rates are going to be coming down in the coming years. Like I shared with you earlier, rates usually get lowered to get us out of a recession, and mortgage experts are basically, the way mortgages are being priced right now, you're having to pay a little bit more on the front end in points because those lenders know that they're not going to be making that money up over the long haul in those loans, i.e. they know rates are going to go down and people are going to refinance. So what I would encourage you to do, don't put yourself in a position where you can't afford your house. But even if you're not necessarily getting the rate that you're really excited about right now, go ahead, get the home that you're excited about, lock in the rate that you need to lock in, knowing that you're more than likely going to be refinancing in the next couple of years. Tip number 2, it's still a seller's market. So even though we're talking about the market softening, even though it's less competitive than it was before. Realize that in the grand scheme of things, it is still a seller's market. You're not going to be able to get 10, 20% off the price of a house. You're still going to be competing against other buyers on a nice property. So realize that yes, it has become a little bit easier for you, but we're still very much in a seller's market. And then last but not least, keep your cash. So if you are somebody that took yourself out of the market, that sidelined themselves because you simply didn't have the cash to play the game, realize we are in a market now where you don't necessarily have to have as much cash that you did before. It used to be if you weren't putting 5, 10, 20% down, and if you didn't have the cash to make up an appraisal difference or cover repairs that a seller wasn't going to fix, you really didn't stand a chance. We are seeing where that's not the case anymore. We're not seeing where appraisal coverage is as much of a thing anymore. We are seeing where sellers are having to begin negotiating repairs again. So if you're somebody that took yourself out of the market because you just didn't have the cash, realize you can come back in here. We can help you find a house and you can buy something. So I hope you guys found that useful. If you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, fears, go ahead and throw them in the comments. Thank you guys for your attention. Thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing you next month.